You know how sometimes there's a technical news release like assay results or whatever, geophysics or whatever, and then you try to read it, you're not thoughtfully, you pretend to know that you know what you're looking at, and so that your wife doesn't think you're just gambling her money on who's going to make the next big treasury discovery in a mountain far away. Maybe that's just me. But the point still stands, though. Exploration is hard. Failure is the norm, and it should be the expectation. Yet somehow, every technical news release I read, the vast majority of which I don't understand, is about how they're just on the cusp of finding that next Grasberg, that next Escondida, right? But how could I know? How could I know it's just BS? Because the vast majority of it is. There's very rarely an Escondida or a Grasberg, right? So how am I going to know as a mid-wit, non-geotechnical person? Well, I'm in Frankfurt for the German gold show, the Deutsche Goldmesse, organized by Kai Hoffman. And I'm going to be annoying the people and asking that specific question. Some of those people are going to be people from the companies, right? So I'm going to be asking them, how do you make sure you're not guilty of that? Have you been guilty of that in your career? Obviously, some of the annoying questions, which means I'm going to love asking it. And as always, you're just coming along for the ride with me. Kai, I want to talk to you about red flags, and specifically red flags in technical news releases. I know you look at a lot of news releases. What's something that you still see being done in the industry that really shouldn't be?
Well, there's a number of things, but let me preface it. I'm not a geologist, I'm not a metallurgist or anything, or an engineer for that matter, but there's a few easy things to look at. One is, of course, gold price or silver price assumption, metal price assumptions, and then that's the start, but then you can start looking at equivalencies. Like, it's, of course, the industry is famous for blending everything together. Doesn't matter if it's economic or not. And then, mentioning a silver equivalent or something that has stuff in it you can't sell. And that's something, of course, the first red flag I look at. Another one I just mentioned as well, or that we should be looking at, is when the CEO is also sort of the QP. That raises questions like, why is that the case? They should always be independent, but in junior mining, they're not.
How would you know if something is sellable though in that equivalent? Like, I'm just sitting at home reading a news release, I see, silver equivalent, that's going to bring in an NPV of whatever. How do I know that's BS?
Well, that's a good question, because usually the retail investor doesn't know. Anything that's payable, like, gets listed on the thing, and if you get a price for it, it works. But usually the smelters don't accept certain metals, or they're penalized because they're just dirty, like arsenic and things like that. Just not a payable metal. But for example, arsenic content is one, and the retail investor stumbles over that, right? But there are certain metals that you just can't treat, and there are penalties for it, and that's when you have to dive a little deeper. That's when you rely on your network and figure that one out. You could even ask ChatGPT, to be honest, and it'll helps a lot in your research, right? Yeah.
How do you recognize kind of the good versus the bad teams, right? Because if you have a decent team, an honest team, they would just by definition not really run that number in the EQ. You work with a lot of people, a lot of companies are here as well. How do you recognize the good from the bad?
The simplest one is just keep gold and silver, the numbers just separate. Don't even mention an EQ. Like, what's the point, right? So keep that separate. Of course, you want to do it to boost the numbers, so that maybe the silver equivalency looks a lot higher and is maybe comparable to a neighboring project or something that's been drawing a lot of attention, right? So you boost the numbers that way. But if you're really serious, you could keep those numbers separate, because the real investors understand what is going on. Another one I would look at is, of course, metal price assumptions in that regard. How consistent are they over time? Like, how do they change? Of course, we're in a higher environment, but are they using now $4,000 for gold and maybe $80 for silver when the last resource was done, or the last calculation was done maybe at $1,700 and $30 of silver, right? And how consistent is that over time as well?
Yeah. This is the busiest that I've seen the DGM. You're getting a little nervous that this is the top of the market?
Not yet, I think. So not yet, because we're still missing certain family offices, generalists. There are no big investors here, meaning the banks are not here, right? That means we're not at that end of the cycle, because the companies are still smaller, and the banks are not coming down to our level yet. They don't stoop down to our level yet. Yeah. So,
what are you working on right now with Comma and SOAR and everything else? What else are you working on right now?
A lot of things. So as you mentioned, we launched the family office, the asset management firm, last year, but we're launching a German language YouTube channel now now as well because I'm not busy enough. I've been peer pressured into launching a German channel because I am German, and people said, why don't you do it in German? And we've got great guests here, keynotes, so we're launching it this week. That's going to be exciting.
Lobo, I know you've seen at least 17,000 news releases in the last few weeks. So what are you looking out for when you see one of those news releases in terms of red flags? What's something the industry still to this day does that you would rather not see?
Well, you say technical, and if you're not a geologist, it's going to be hard to really, sort out. But there are simple things. Some of them start with D, like discovery. And sorry, a grab sample does not count as a discovery, right? It's kind of like, oh, I discovered my grandmother has a golden flower. That doesn't prove anything. It might help you with the target. Development is another one. Calling your company a developer doesn't mean you're actually developing the asset. A lot of advanced exploration types want to call themselves that, suggest, we're adding value, we're developing the mine.
What qualifies as a developer?
Well, shovels hitting ground would be a very clear indication, but at least having a feasibility study which shows an economic case as opposed to a dream or a hope, but at least a measurable argument for this being worth building. Permits would be good. Financing would be great. But even if you're in that final stage, in that last lap of working on getting those last boxes ticked, I would count that as development. But ideally, you're building a mine, and you know where that goes, my favorite pre-production sweet spot.
So in summary, look for whether the objectives that the companies are using are actually fitting for what they're doing.
Look for bullshit, my friend.
How am I going to do?
You won't be disappointed.
That's one of those catchphrases of yours that I really do like because it's true. How could I know? Like I maybe I have a few years of experience, or maybe have none. How am I going to know from afar? What am I really looking? What are the tells?
Okay, well, Kai's not paying me to say this, but I really think that coming to these things is a really valuable way to do this. And okay, say you're not a geologist and you don't know what degree of batasic alteration is going to indicate the porphyries nearby or whatever. Fine, but if somebody comes across like a used car salesman, that gut response that you have, it's usually right. He usually is a used car salesman trying to sell you something else instead now. Are just asking basic questions. Like, suppose you're not ready to ask advanced questions. Ask the basic ones. If they can't answer those easily, there's a problem. So don't sell yourself short. And I'm not talking to you now, I'm talking to the audience. Right? You can do this, and you should. And if you do, 80-20 rule, I like to say. Just the fact that you bother to try will put you ahead of the investment herd.
Well, do you think it's getting easier or harder to do that now with where the market is and how many companies there are and everything? Is it getting better or worse in terms of how they communicate and how honest the companies are?
Yeah, I don't think it's gotten any better. When the market's bullish, and we had a lot of people raise a lot of money last year, gold goes screaming up, and copper is at or near all-time highs. So it's been easy for promoters to raise money. So there's visibly a lot more promotion going on. Maybe the volume is there, but percentage-wise, liar's gonna lie, cheater's gonna cheat. Really, and I don't want to get too profane here and repeat my foul language, but caveat emptor, that's my mother motto, right? You should understand that these people, as kind and as friendly as they may act, as welcoming as they are to your inquiries, they are not your friends. They are salesmen and women. And that's okay, that's their job. But you have to understand that. As long as you understand that person on the other side of the table, they are not your friend. If not their adversary necessarily, they are in opposition, and you need to understand that and go in with that mindset.
I know you have to run and give a talk, so just briefly, bullish, cautious, or bearish? And we're talking, let's say, copper, gold, silver.
Both, all of the above, in the sense that bad news can be good news.
Sure.
So bad news can be good news. We'll go from there. Tune in more to find out.
Hugh, I want to talk to you about technical news releases, and specifically red flags in technical news releases. What's something that you see in the industry being done that you would rather not see?
Well, the good thing about the industry today is it's very well regulated. In fact, probably over-regulated by 43101, the policy around reporting in Canada on the venture exchange and the TSX. But there are still some companies that do things that I wouldn't do myself with our company. And the biggest one I see it being done is to put out drill results without putting those drill results into perspective. And by what I mean by that is sometimes we put out drill results and we don't say how deep those results are, or we don't say where the actual gold is coming from that gives the big wide intercept in the result. And there's a big difference in how those results can be turned into money through mining, and it really depends on the details that some companies obfuscate when they put out their results. So I'd say drill hole results, that's one thing. The other thing that I really like to avoid is a news release that doesn't provide context for what's being done. For example, if we talk about 100,000 ounces a year of gold production, I think it's important to also talk about what the costs are involved with getting that 100,000 ounces out of the ground are. What are the unit costs that are related to that? If we're going to be making forecasts about capital, I think it's important to disclose what are the components of that capital cost so that an investor can understand where risks are relative to that number. So a lot of it's around providing the detail and the context, both in terms of drill results and in terms of the engineering study results and the metrics around optimizing for a gold project.
How do I see that, though, as a non-technical person? When I open up a news release, you said it's important to have context. Where did the gold actually come from? How am I going to see that if I'm not a geo?
Yeah, that's where being an investor with good people, with good managements really comes into play, because oftentimes it's not possible for somebody to know all of the bits of information that a management team will be confronted with and will decide upon before putting a press release out. So you choose good people, choose people who have been good to investors in the past, who treat investors fairly and have a record of making good decisions on behalf of investors. I think that's the key to being in a good place in the future as an investor.
Can be challenging, though, if you have a drill result and you want to put it out there, you want to make the market, excited quickly. How have you made sure that you're keeping the market excited, but also not over promoting or sharing results without context? How have you made sure that not to be guilty of that in your career so far?
Well, look, it's tough, and I'm the first person to admit that there's a lot of decision making that goes into putting results out and getting it right. And fortunately, at Revival Gold, we've been very fortunate. We haven't had any missteps along the way, but it can happen, and it can happen because there's a long chain of QA/QC between the point when the result is reported and the point or received and the point when it's reported. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong in between, and we just have to be careful with it and take our time. And sometimes it means that we hold back our enthusiasm and our excitement about what we're seeing visually in the core or about what we're seeing with one particular assay until we can put some context to it. And again, that's a judgment call.
What are you working on right now at Revival? When are you going to have some news out? When do you think you and I should sit down for a proper CEO barbecue?
As a matter of fact, it'll be around drill results. So You'll have to give me the time to make sure that our team has got all their I's dotted and T's crossed before we come to chat with the next barbecue. Yep. But it should be within the next month or two.
All right, Dustin, you're going to like this one. We're going to talk about red flags in technical news releases. What's something that you see us doing as an industry that we really shouldn't be doing in technical news releases?
Comparing your deposit or your rocks to something that isn't analogous at all. So I've seen people in the Golden Triangle claim that they have the same rocks as KSM, Red Chris, and Glore Creek.
At the same time.
And KSM does not have the same rocks as Red Chris. Red Chris does not have the same rocks as Glow Creek. So to compare one deposit to all three of those is completely inaccurate. And the company, a company doing that might have rocks that aren't even the same as any of them. So I think that's one big red flag. Just making random comparisons, just really reaching.
Well, so you would know that because first of all, you're a geologist, and second of all, you live and breathe the Golden Triangle. How do I know that KSM doesn't have the same rocks as right? How do I go about when I see a comp in a news release? How do I go about checking whether it's BS or not?
Just put it in AI. It's super easy. It's the easiest bullshit filter these days. Just put it into AI. And
do you have a prompt? What do you ask it?
Yeah, I would say put it in and say, well, ask maybe are the things they're comparing it to, are those things even related to each other?
That's a good one.
And then I'd probably just ask it, is this accurate?
Is there a development story or exploration stage element to it as well? Could you know that early on? Let's say someone has like one drill hole and they're comparing it. Could you know?
Yeah. Yeah. The BC Geological Survey has done enough work there. If what they're saying doesn't line up with what they've done, then they're wrong. I think another thing would also be sections. I want to see a flat section. From a presentation standpoint, inclined sections can be helpful to illustrate the scale of something, but a flat section straight on, you really want to see so you can see if things actually line up. Because if it's a line right through an area, you want to know if things fit on that line.
Yeah. Have you been guilty of that in your career? Have you made comps that shouldn't have been made?
I don't think comps. We might have done something on the section end, but comps, I don't think so. No.
Well, you always talk about a team essentially, and that your team has experience, and it's also just a good team that wouldn't do that in the first place. How can I recognize that maybe from afar? Like, how do I know? How do I see that? How do I know a team is a good team that wouldn't do anything like that?
Again, just. Use AI or just use Google, or if they're old, they can ask Jeeves. But just look at who's on the team, who's the VPX, who's the chief geologist, and you can in Canada. Data is all public, so you can go look at the assessment report that was written, and if you really want to dig deep, you can. And I know a lot of people do a lot of research on these companies, and if they really want to go that deep, go look who's actually doing the work in the field. You can see the geologists, you can just Google them, look on LinkedIn, you can figure out their credentials, you can figure out that kind of thing, and then go to a conference and ask what people think of them. Go to PDAC or go Roundup.
Right. And go be annoying to them, or watch Resource Talks being annoying to them.
Oh yeah.
What are you working on right now? When's your next news release coming out? When are you and I going to have a proper sit down again at barbecue?
So in terms of news flow, we'll be mobilizing into the field right at the end of May, and then our program will start. We'll start drilling around the 15th. So 15th is when we're allowed to start mechanized work effectively. So we'll be building pads on the 15th, and the drill will be landing on them a couple days later. And then another drill will follow right after. So right now we had planned to have a drill on around the 15th, and then one about 2 weeks later. We're not sure exactly where the first drill is going to go, and obviously Hank is our priority, the porphyry, but everything depends on the melt. So until we actually get out there, we were there maybe a month ago looking at it, and it was melting pretty quickly, but we got to wait till we're out there again to know exactly where we're going to be. But pretty quickly, either way, we'll be drilling both things. So I think probably around the time of starting up would be a good time to have another chat, and there'll be regular news flow through there. But in the meantime, I'm flying to Italy tomorrow and going on a vacation with my wife. I haven't had a break in a long time, so I'm going to check out for a bit.
No barbecues during the vacation. News though, in terms of assays in the back of it, so mid-July and July, that's what you're thinking then in terms of assays?
I don't think it would be that quick, because just to put in perspective, if you're drilling a longer hole, it can take 10 days to up to 2 weeks to finish the hole, and often you'll send assays to the lab as they come, or you'll send the core to the lab for assays. I mean, you don't wait till you finish the whole hole. So, and we generally have once a week. It might be twice a week a shipment to the lab. Even then, it takes I don't think I've ever seen assays within faster than a month. And you need to log the core.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things to do. But we're going to have a core scanner on site, so we're going to have a pretty good idea on whether we're into mineralization or not. Maybe not the gold mineralization, but we'll know whether we're in a sulfide system visually as well. So we'll be able to adjust our program and add the drills where we want. We're gonna have 3 drills, so we can really, once we're onto something, we can just pile into it and go really aggressive.
All right, Philippe, I want to talk to you about something that's very close to your experience in the industry and what you like doing. Technical red flags in news releases. When I open up a technical news release, what's kind of a big red flag that still gets used in the industry today, yet people kind of close their eyes to it?
The red flags I would look out for is the wiggle room, the allocations that the consultants and the companies can use in these 43101s. 43101s were supposed to provide a level playing field, but the consultants and the companies are using cutoff grades. They're using lower costs to capex, capital expenditure, and those are the red flags they have to look out for, because they make a project look a lot better than it actually is. And the more remote you are, the more remote project that you have, it appears that you could use a lot more wiggle room. If you're downtown in a mining district or in a mining area, well, you could benchmark and you have to use more reliable numbers. But so those are red flags I would look for.
How am I going to know, though? I mean, I'm mid-wit, non-geologist. What am I going to know? Like, how do I look at cutoff grades and all these things? How am I going to recognize it up front that it's too high or too low?
Well, you have to really do your homework, and I would imagine that's tough on the retail investor. But there are letter writers that do that work for you, and they do the comparables. They will say, well, look, in this area, how come these 3 other juniors or these 3 other mining companies are having these all-inclusive sustaining costs, and you're using a much lower number. So it's always good to benchmark and compare yourself with other juniors, right? And if you're evaluating another junior. So yeah, but those are the red flags, and they become very obvious when you look at one company using a much lower number to build a mill on site than another company which is right down the highway, right? They should have comparable numbers, and that's not the case.
Have you been guilty of those red flags in your career? Have you been a part of a company that's done that before?
No. But it really does piss me off to have to compete with people that do it. And I guess one of the reasons Agnico Eagle owns 27% of Cartier is that they know that we're not a delinquent operator, and we use the right numbers.
How do you make sure to do that? Like, what maybe separates the good teams who don't do that versus the bad teams who would do those things?
Well, you use the right contractors, and you make sure that you never get bullied by either your board or retail investors to go for the less reputable organizations to do your technical work.
Yeah, fair enough. I know you have to run because you've got meetings here. When are you and I going to have a proper long-term barbecue?
Okay. Well, we just put out our metallurgical results from the project just this week. And by mid-June to early July, I'll be ready to really, get a deeper dive into the project, and I think you'll appreciate it.
All right, Gerald, I want to talk to you about red flags specifically in technical news releases. I know you've seen a lot of news releases throughout your career. What should I be looking out for as an investor when I'm opening up technical news releases?
Well, I think red flags is... there could be very different one, right? I think in general, the public should be aware that when they read through a press release, they need to be careful about the detail. I mean, for example, if you smear an assays, like if I have to release something like we did on hole 24, we intersected 23 grams over 5.7 meters, but we disclosed that there was 198 gram over half a meters, which means your 23 gram over 5.7 is uncut. We use capping normally to cut back everything to 30 grams to be conservative. But usually you do that at the resource sector when you look at the geostat. But the capping could be 60 gram, could be 100 gram. It depends on your gold deposit. Every gold deposit is different. So every geostat will be different. But just disclose it. That's very simple.
So essentially not disclosing would be the red flag here.
I wouldn't say that much. I would say just being transparent about the result is important. I mean, you want to be, like I still remember one time when I was in Timmins, I was looking at the project when I was at Barrick Gold, and the guy released like 23 grams over, say, 20 meters. We went back, we looked at the core, it was downhole. So the mineralization basically was not true width. Right? So this is another thing. I mean, you have to look at, like, we aim at producing results that are like true width or close to true width. But sometimes you see an intersection like this and you want to see it, and that's why you go and visit the core. Unfortunately, it's not in the press release. So your due diligence become technical visit on site.
Have you been guilty of that in your career?
Never.
Never?
Never. I would never do anything that is not transparent and honest.
What separates the good from the bad teams? When I'm looking at, when I'm reading a news release, really, you could say, oh, a good team would never do that, like you just said. So what separates the good from the bad?
I don't think you can answer that question. I mean, this is like, it's just everybody can decide how they want to put the result out together. So for me, it's like I'm not there to say who's a good team, who's a bad team. I'm just going to be always honest about my result myself. I cannot talk about the others.
What are you working on right now? When's the next big piece of news coming out? When are you and I going to have a proper barbecue?
We just did.
Okay.
We just did. This morning we released our resource update. We've added 595,000 ounces from underground at the Con mine into an area that could probably actually double in size because it needs a lot of drilling. But it's reaffirmed the mine shut down in 2003. They left 600,000 ounces plus at 11 gram. We just added 600,000 ounces to the model. We have Yellow Rex with more than 200,000 ounces. We have our Cartier deposit that could be mine open pit for another 200. So we're getting over 1 million ounces easily, and it's putting itself very well. I think we will have a very good, hopefully we'll be able to materialize the Con mine acquisition in 2026. That's our goal.
Okay.
And the drill will be turning again soon. So
an interview in the next couple of weeks?
Hopefully, yeah. I look forward to the invite.
Ricky, I want to talk to you about news releases, and specifically, what are the main red flags that you still see in the industry in news releases, and specifically technical news releases that you think shouldn't be happening, but they still happen?
Well, clarity is always seems to be an ongoing issue, and consistency. I mean, I think one that comes to mind would be when you're reporting, like for us with Westhaven, we have gold projects are reporting gold intervals, and what are the constraints that the companies put on the table of results that's in the release, and so that there's no smearing, I guess would be the sort of the term that people would look so there's good context of what they mean, and is that interval, if it's 30 grams over 10 meters, how is that put in? So what we've done is we have made sure we have a tolerance that's listed in the table for the allowable internal dilution that will be below the cutoff, which is also then listed, and then within the interval, we also have a column to show what is the highest individual assay within that interval. So just ideas like that to try and help get it across is sort of a constant, and then the usual thing on what is true width and really what does it mean in the context of the drilling that you're doing.
As a non-technical person, how do I check for that? So I open up an assay news release. What do I do? Go to the table immediately, and what am I looking for?
Well, I'd read the headline probably, and then the bullets. But then when you look at the table, it would be, okay, so I've got these numbers. Are there any asterisks? And so what is the asterisk telling me? And are the constraints put on there to tell you what is the cutoff that's been used? what has to be, what does an assay have to be included in that interval? And like on the dilution piece, we just say for the resource infill drilling we're doing right now on Shovel Nose is we won't report any interval that has more than 3 meters of dilution that's below that. And it works because it's quite a wide deposit. Our mineralized intervals can be up to 50 odd meters wide. So,
have you been guilty of that in your career so far? Have you participated in grade smearing?
Gosh, I'd like to say no. I don't think so. I mean, so much of my career has been in diamonds, and it was very particular on how diamond results would get reported. But it's a similar thing as how big are your sample shots, and so you have all these diamonds, and what are the sizes, and making sure you give the size range and the number of stones in each of those, right. that sort of thing, and that you're not measuring diamonds that wouldn't be recovered and would be not economic, and you're not including those in your numbers. So that's on the.
Yeah. A large part of it is the team, right? I mean, some teams you can trust, and some others maybe you should trust a little less. What's the difference there? What's a good team? What's a team that is not going to do grade smearing essentially look like? And how could I recognize that just looking at it from, at home?
I think reputationally, so if you're at home and you're looking at companies, is looking into the track record of the people that have been involved. And if have they been involved for a very short period of time in multiple projects that haven't gone anywhere, that might tell you something, versus people who've been involved and seen things all the way through and through studies and through that more rigorous sort of disclosure requirements that you get to as a bigger project gets, the bigger the microscope that's on it. That would probably be a way to do it, I would say, reputationally.
Good. What are you working on right now with Westhaven? When do you think it's going to be a good time for you and I to sit down for kind of a long, proper conversation? Yeah. When's the next news release coming out?
Yeah, soon. We're resource drilling. We did just put out some news a week ago with the very first part of the resource infill drilling. We're starting exploration drilling. All of that is, and we announced the start of our pre-feasibility study. So we're kind of waiting to get all that lined up for us to sit down. All of it funded by our strategic partnership with Dundee Corporation. They're funding the next $85 million to see that through. So I think now that we've got ourselves lined up and into the pre-feasibility with that drilling component, we're just, well, today as we stand here, we're up to 4 drills on the property. So we've ramped up according to plan. Everything is set. So I would say soon.
Yeah, good. So you don't have to raise money to see that drill program through then?
No, I mean, that's the nice thing and a big part of our story and just talking about it here is that if you like the technical aspects of it, the risks of dilution is set with this agreement in place. We get access and exposure to the completion of the pre-feasibility study, which is going to go straight into feasibility, environmental assessment on the development side with exploration happening, and that's funded through Dundee. So we take care of our marketing and our overhead, and the money in the ground is coming from the Dundee transaction.
Jason, I want to talk to you about red flags, and so that's one of your favorite topics, I know, but I want to talk to you specifically about red flags in technical news releases. I know you pay very close attention to the industry. What is something you see in news releases still being done to this day, which actually should not be done?
I'd say one of the number one things, I would say there's always little technical things like unclear graphics. I find super annoying as an investor myself. So you want to have clarity in your graphics so that people can understand exactly how far down is the mineralization. So that's one thing, is not making it very clear. Like they'll use elevation instead of distance. So you'll mistake something and you're like, wait, this is actually 300 meters underground. It's not 100 meters. And I'd say even superseding that would be true widths. So you really, from a technical perspective, you should always be reporting what your true widths are on your drill holes. And if you're not reporting true widths, then I would not really rely on that data as an investor.
Right. Is that something you've been guilty of in your career yourself?
No, because if you work with solid geologists and who know their technical information, they'll always be putting that information. They'll make it very clear. It's not buried in it. So as an investor, you just learn to appreciate that. I'd say probably the number 3 thing would be metallurgy, because I think metallurgy is such a technical area. It's really hard to simplify it so that investors understand. And so I think that's a challenge for everybody. But what you do see is a lot of companies minimize the amount of metallurgical data that they provide. even in their more fulsome disclosures, I find that often a lot of the metallurgical work, and metallurgists probably get a lot less credit than they probably should, because at the end of the day, that's really where you're going to make money in this business, on an operating basis. Is the better the metallurgy, the more you can get for your product.
How do I recognize that, though? How do I know there's, people doing good work versus people doing work to just show it in a news release? How am I, as a non-geologist, non-technical person, how am I going to recognize that?
Well, the easy thing is graphics, because you can tell. If you can understand what the graphic is, that's easy. That's good. And you can get feedback, especially working in investor relations, I can get feedback easily from investors of, did they understand what we were trying to communicate? And if they come back to me and they're essentially echoing the information we've put out there, then that means that we've clearly communicated it. And true widths, I think, is just it's either there or it's not there. And so just do a search every release you get and just look for true width. And if it's not mentioned there in a drill result, then I think you've got a small red flag to start with, and that's something to immediately talk to the company about and say, why did you not report the true widths? And even if it's general, because a lot of times you don't know the true width, but at least you've got to put something in there to tell people that you're not 100% certain on this is what the true width is, because that really makes a huge difference on what the value of that result is.
Yeah. Good versus bad technical teams, you said, is important there, because the good teams are always going to do it well. What's the difference there? How do you make that difference, or how could someone at home make that difference?
I think it's tougher, as a non-geologist, as a lay investor myself. I think it's harder. It just takes time, and you have to read many different companies' releases on information. Finding the distances, from surface, for example, that's something that I find that you really have to focus in on that, because at the end of the day, is it going to be an open pit or is it going to be an underground operation? Is it typical for this region to have that style? And so you have the deeper you go, the higher grade you need to make that economic. So you can have fairly low grades, but if it's at surface, it can actually be more profitable than better grades that are deeper. So trying to play off those two, I think, is something you just have to learn over time as an investor.
I know Tim's here, although I saw he was too busy to talk to me, which I can appreciate. When's the next time you think Tim and I should sit down for a proper interview? When are you going to have kind of big news for a proper barbecue?
For us, we've got a great year ahead of us here. We just announced a strategic investor coming in, Alpayana, pretty well known, getting more well known in the sector. They're going to come in for over 19% now of the company. That deal's subject to closing soon. That's going to help us double the size of our exploration project. So we've got two main properties, the Carmenes in the north, which is really a gold discovery that we've made. So we're doing drilling there right now. We're also drilling in the southern project at Escacina, which is copper dominant, but also has some gold, silver, tin, other elements. So we're doing both of those, so we'll have results from both of them. We're also doing the basic geological work that you need to do. So we're doing new targets, we're doing some soil geochem, channel samples. So we'll have excellent news flow this entire year.
Those assay results that you're talking about, when are those coming out?
I would say it depends. We've been kind of pushing the team to see where we're at with them, so we're getting close. I would say in the next month to 2 months.
All right, Jim, I want to talk to you about red flags in technical news releases, but specifically from your perspective, because you're a geophysicist, and I think those news releases are misunderstood most of the time. So when you look at a geophysical news release, what are you looking for, and what are some of the common red flags in those?
Exactly. Geophysics it encompasses many different techniques, but they are generally all displayed as a series of color-coded maps with big red dots, and generally the red dot is where your attention wants to be focused. So whether that's induced polarization, which is like a slice through the ground, or whether you're looking at magnetics, look at how the company's portraying it, whether they've put a scale on the image or not. And just the intensity of the magnetics or the IP will be reflected in the scale on the side. Compare that with other news releases from that company or other companies, and just see if you're reading things on the same scale. If that high chargeability is comparable to high chargeability in another similar deposit, or if your magnetic results look like another company's news releases with the same strength and intensity. That'll tell you a lot, because the way you process contrast the data with geophysics allows the geophysicist a lot of latitude to adjust the colors and adjust the scales. And that's something that you should definitely pay attention to and just compare around. And there are lots of tools online where you can compare images very easily and just do your diligence. Don't take them in isolation, look at them in comparison.
When you take an IP, for example, that's something that I see a lot of. What's good intensity? Like, what's the number that I'm looking for? Is it 1,000, 10,000? What am I looking for in that little scale?
Yeah, so a good intensity, and I'm not going to quote numbers right now, but I'm going to say with IP, it's a bit of a different thing. You look for patterns in the images as well as intensity. So say for a porphyry, you want to see what looks like a volcano that never made it to the surface, sort of a cone-shaped high induced polarization anomaly that corresponds with a low resistivity anomaly that looks more or less the same. Then you go beyond that and look at the intensity. And so you can compare those very easily to established scales for different rock types. For resistivity and IP, it's more or less directly comparable with other surveys of similar rock types.
Have you been guilty of that in your career? I know you had a company that did a lot of geophysics for people and whatnot. Have you been guilty of putting something out there like that without a scale?
No, we use scales all the time.
Yeah.
If you don't have a scale, you have no idea what you're looking at.
Yeah, good. What are you working on right now in Yukon Metals? When are you going to have some news that you think you and I should do kind of a deep dive interview on?
Yeah, so I'm quite excited about two big IP, three-dimensional IP surveys that we're doing at the AZ and Birch properties. And those cover our most promising zones where we're looking to find the IP signatures of porphyry mineralization. We already have two-dimensional, which is basically a slice through the ground that shows something that's very intriguing at AZ. And if we can get a three-dimensional version of the same that shows patterns consistent with that mineralization, that gives us some very good drill targets. Yeah, and
but you already drilled it, and I typically see people do geophysics first and then drill. This going maybe the other way around. Why?
So geophysics without a drill hole is that can be interpreted many different ways. If you've got a drill hole already and run your geophysics over top of it, you've got your ground truth. You know what's down there already. You can calibrate the rest of that geophysics image with what you found at that drill hole. So the accuracy increases immensely.
Yeah, good. And you have the money to do all that work and then get back to drilling, or do you think you're going to be back to the market sometime soon?
We've got the money to do all the programs for this summer.
Keith, I want to talk to you about technical news releases and specifically red flags in technical news releases. What's something that you see the industry still doing that really we shouldn't be doing in technical news releases?
Yeah, what a minefield it is. And if you're not technical, it's awful. Everybody's got the best deposit in the world.
Oh, yeah.
And strictly speaking, that can't be true. There must be some bad ones out there, and I can assure you there are. The potential economic outcomes are interesting, grossly exaggerated. The best technical, the best financial analysis of any project in the world will be the PEA, because as we get into more and more details, it becomes clear that this is going to be more expensive than we thought, more difficult than we thought, less recovery, whatever the case is going to be. But like the optimistic view is the PEA. It should be essentially ignored. It's used by people as an excuse to be able to quote a financial quality of the project. The TSX insist upon these reports being done so that you can talk about valuation. But for the investor, wait for the pre-feasibility study. That would be my advice.
Yeah. Have you ever been guilty of that, kind of hanging your hat on a PEA? Have you done that in your career?
I've been guilty of having a PEA, like everybody else, because you have to, and I can promise you it looked great. But I've also been guilty of going to the next step and doing pre-feasibility studies and being involved with feasibility studies. So the people that get to the PEA and stop and think that that's the answer, that's not the people you want to hang out with. You want to hang out with the people that are actually trying to get the project to the end and make it work.
Is it always ignorable? Like, should I always ignore a PEA, or does it depend on the team that's put that PEA together? Like, you might have, good teams versus teams that might want to sweeten.
A thoroughly smart team will will want to manage their PEA a little bit to make sure that when the rest of the results come, that it's not going to look stupid. Like, they want to be able to emulate that. And if everything else stays the same, like commodity price, they want their next step to be at a similar level. So people like that will hit a project pretty hard. They'll put very big contingency, negative contingency into the project to make sure that it doesn't look silly later on, but mostly people are just enjoying themselves and trying to entertain everybody with a fabulous PEA.
What are you working on right now with Latin Metals? I know there's a Spinco, so when do you think you're going to have a news release? When do you think you and I should do a deep dive barbecue again?
Yeah, soon. We've actually missed each other a couple of times, some of which was my fault, so I apologize. But yeah, we should get into it in the next couple of weeks. Latin Metals is super busy. We're in a phase where not only are we seeing projects drilled for the first time, but we're also expecting that through the rest of this year, that most of the rest of our projects will go out to partners, which is a huge, huge step for the company. We also created the spin-out. And this is a fabulous idea. Like, the spin-out idea came from this. If you've got a prospect generator and you're trying to minimize shareholder dilution, you only face one slight problem, which is if you see an opportunity to acquire something, you really are not in a position to issue a lot of stock and to raise that money to make that acquisition. Creating a spin-out that could run in parallel to Latin Metals with a separate management team running as a standard exploration company allowed us that flexibility, and it means the company Latin Explorer, which is the spin-out, will have a really strong mandate to go and look for significant acquisitions, hopefully something with resources attached to it, but also with significant upside.
You didn't have to get that creative on the name, though.
We really, really, really wanted to keep Latin in the name, just to create some kind of connection between the companies, and because we are fully intending to be based in Latin America, so yeah.
All right, Bruce, I want to talk to you about red flags specifically in technical news releases. What do you think is kind of the biggest red flag that you still see in the industry today that shouldn't really be happening, but unfortunately still happening?
There are a few things. Grate smearing is one of the obvious ones that's probably mentioned by many people. But another one that sort of gets under my skin is visual assays, or assays put out by XRF instead of the lab results. People still seeing that occasionally do that, and I just think it can be very misleading.
Always a red flag, or could it sometimes be something that points you in the right direction?
Well, I think as an explorer, look, XRF information is really good as you're exploring, but it's not something I think you want to release to the public. Go with lab results. They're definitive, they're precise, they're accurate, whereas XRF can be inaccurate and misleading. So it just, I think lab results speak for themselves. That's the best way to go.
Have you ever been guilty of that? Visual assays or PXRFs?
Not a chance. Not a chance.
Not knowing it for a store miner?
No.
Okay. How do you recognize the kind of the good versus the bad teams in industry that might try to mislead you in that way? How do you recognize that as a retail investor who's sitting at home? Myself, I'm sitting in Belgium reading news releases. How can I recognize a good versus a bad team?
Well, that's a bit challenging because it's not always necessarily apparent. But if you see a lot of pictures of core and a lot of sort of flowery descriptions without that backed up with lab results, I think that for me is a red flag I look for, and that always concerns me when management's doing that.
Right. Okay. What are you working on right now at Storm? What do you have coming up? Any kind of big news releases that you think you and I should sit for a deep dive on, or what do you have coming up?
Well, really focused on the Gold Standard project, which is a big VMS target that's got a lot of compelling evidence pointing to the fact that it is VMS. So we're just about to get to work on the ground there. The big news will be when we're drilling, and obviously the results come from that drilling. No visual assays, but definitely see some results throughout the summer from the drilling on that.
Okay. Do you have enough money to make all that drilling happen, or do you have to go back to market?
No, we don't have to go back to market. We've got $5 million in working capital. The expectation is that the drill program will cost between 500,000 and 750. It's about 2,000 to 3,000 meters. We're expecting it to cost about $250 a meter. So that's, we're fully funded to do the drilling.
Right. Okay. I know you had tons of meetings today, so you're probably looking forward to getting not having to look at my face anymore. So I'll get out of here. But thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.